Internet of Things makes our cars driverless, our homes connected, our cities smart, and factories run seamlessly. Artificial intelligence combined with IoT data is where the business value is created. Imagine yourself in the driverless world. I will teach you to pivot your career and innovate in your business using IoT, AI, and autonomous vehicles. Let's begin your journey with me today. Hello, everybody. Happy IoT Day. I'm here with Rob van Kranenburg, the founder of IoT Council, and my inspiration for what I do in a broader sense with IoT and all my work on IoT Day. Rob, welcome.
Well, I'm very honored to hear that. Yes, thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
So we spoke last year on IoT Day. So I hope to have a conversation about what you have seen and where you have traveled in the last year, and to give us a sense of what's happening in IoT. But first, I want to know, beyond IoT Council, what do you do? I know you help governments, you help companies. What do you do? What's your offering?
Well, I hope that I help them, but I think I'm trying to help people to understand organizational shifts. And so this is with companies, and companies are moving into large ecosystems. So what I've been doing, and this has been mainly in the context of huge projects, 3-year projects, European research and development projects. For example, with the last one, which was called Take It Smart, which was about smart techs with Unilever and Durst and Siemens and everything. My role was to be some kind of an ecosystem manager. So we're moving from, let's say, customer relation management to stakeholder coordination to ecosystem building. And this is sort of basically what I've been doing with the companies, and this is a lot of sort of streamlining or organizing discussions and meetings and debates and trying to get people to see some kind of shared vision. And the same thing I'm trying to do with other large institutions, and these large institutions have all been built on the book paradigm, which was like from the Middle Ages up until now, and they're all being hit, and they're all being changed dramatically by the web, the internet, and the Internet of Things.
So when you say large organizations, are you talking countries? Like we're talking nations here?
Yes, we're talking nations. We're talking supra institutions like the European Union.
Yeah.
We're talking about zones of like China. We're talking also about regions like Latin America.
Yeah.
And we're all seeing that all these institutions were built on certain indicators of success. And these indicators of success, and this is the thinking of René Thom, the mathematician, and he's saying we see paradigm shifts when the drivers that are tuned to the indicators of success are changing. And what we see now is that the drivers that build all these institutions, which was basically exclusivity, patterns, not sharing, closing things down, these build these large sort of institutions. But the drivers that are tuned to the shift that is in the sharing of the internet, these PIP, pass on the packet, World Wide Web, pass on the link, and Internet of Things, which is creating this massive transparency.
I would say pass on the data.
Pass on the data. So this is indeed, so we have pass on the packet, which has always been let's say the anarchist hippie sort of dream of Vint Cerf, Bob Kahn, so the founders of the internet, for which we're all very grateful, of course. And Tim Berners-Lee, who then open sourced HTML, would pass on the link. And of course, now he's becoming a bit more aware that his friend Ted Nelson, who did Xanadu at the same time, was actually maybe more apt to the situation with this notion of reciprocity that Tim Berners-Lee left out of his protocol. And of course, pass on the data with IoT. Now, this triple shift is something that these institutions are unable to withstand. So they have to change. Now we see companies changing, and companies have moved away from harnessing infrastructure or hardware as a business model. So hardware has become a commodity, connectivity has become a commodity. We're actually nearing the step where it's not so much data and platforms that is happening, but it's the moment where the AI is hitting the big data. And this is what we see everywhere in the world. So the data is basically already settled. It's settled in large ecosystems, national bubbles like China, or surveillance capitalist models like GAFA. And the platforms are also pretty settled. So the world is running either on, let's say, Amazon, Tencent, or sort of all of that.
So when you say help ecosystems, you're essentially looking at ecosystems where they have this historic data and this whole model of not sharing, and then create a shared vision so they could share and create that new world that you're aspiring for.
This is basically happening a little bit sort of in itself or as itself with this triple shift of pass on the packet, the link, and the data. As you said, pass on the data as being the third step, which makes me think now. I shouldn't think now, but that makes me think, because that's it. That's true. So then, nothing that was coming from before this triple shift is able to keep standing. This is what we see. So we have all these shifts, and now people are trying to create agency over the next step, which is when the AI is going to hit the big data in the platforms. And this is creating a kind of, and this is actually, I think, the moment where, well, what we will see in IoTDay this year, we will see that shift. So we'll see the shift where, for the first time actually in history, at least if you're not an animist, thinking that the world was always online, of course, because the trees have spirits, and this is all true, of course. But in our way of thinking, where we're actually simply tagging things and then creating this sort of next layer, this is a moment where, for the first time, machines and deep learning and all the things that the shifts that we see happening in the algorithm space is actually creating some kind of a partner with human intelligence, and this is influencing all our services, and we see basically sort of new services or service ecosystems sort of forming.
So other than my Stanford teaching work,
Yeah.
I advise cities or like a whole group of board of directors of a corporation, and it's very focused. They are all aware that something big is happening and it's impacting their industry or their city. And I focus specifically on urban mobility, how that is shifting and what is needed to do in terms of mobility to get us to this connected world or driverless world, as I call it. And so they focus on, hey, autonomous vehicles are coming, but to get there, how does the car get connected? For that, how does public transport business models change, and how do we get there? So that's been a very niche focused work that I do, but I find that there is general awareness. So I want to come back to you on travel, right? You've been traveling a lot. And so you came back from...
We had a seminar lately in council, and we had a seminar on 5G, and 5G, I think, will be this, together with the AI, will be sort of the focus of a lot of things that we will see happening today in this year in IoTDay. And one of the cases for 5G is mobility, is the connected car, is a self-driving car. And there was a very nice, interesting case. It's maybe a little bit anecdotal, but it sort of is that Uber is wanting to have everything connected, the entire fleet, by 2030. And so the idea is that sort of they're actually now purchasing sort of buildings and equipment sort of quite near a lot of intersections across the world in order to have their 5G beacons, who need to be very specific and very pointed. Sort of at these cars. So this is a very, very important moment, because all our notions of public transport, they come and they are embedded in a kind of a social thinking, in a kind of a social economic thinking that had to do with emancipation and participation And it also basically sort of determined how cities were built to a large extent. Now, if we miss out on this 5G infrastructure in the public sense, then what we might see is offerings, and of course I've got nothing against commercial offerings and sort of this, we need public-private investments in this space. But this is going to shift dramatically our notions of public transport and that may be good to a certain extent because things will go into leasing and more people can actually have rides then. But to see all of this then go into this notion of, again, people individually driving their cars or leasing instead of thinking about new ways of transportation. So we should be thinking about new ways of transportation, not about sort of the connected car as a car space.
No, I do believe there's going to be on-demand mobility. Cities are testing it out. And so even our public transportation is going to be on-demand mobility. And then there's going to be, you know, fleets and shared services. So one of the shifts I'm seeing is a lot of automakers and a bunch of startups are building mobility platforms, which is essentially creating some kind of identity for the consumer and some kind of fleet management and how to layer up payments for mobility services and to add blockchain to that, to do that in such a way that it is anonymized and the consumer has control over their digital identity. So that could be a whole new topic we can go off into. I hope you'll come back after IoT Day and we can talk about it.
Fantastic. Because this is sort of, there's so much happening and there's so many good things happening. And this is also one of the fundamental reasons to have this IoT Day. So for once, we don't want to discuss privacy, security, sort of like all these red herrings sort of that are out there. For once, we want to really think about, we're not going to do this without any sense of security and privacy and all that, but we need a much more positive attitude to this space.
So tell me about your travels. What are you seeing and where did you come from? What country do you want to start with?
So recently came back from Russia, and Russia has been having a very good IoT scene. So there's the IoT Internet of Things.ru. These are friends of mine for the past decade. And I've been talking for the past 10 years about Internet of Things on the World Public Forum, which is an institution for dialogue that has major sort of seminars and conferences. And I always like going to Russia and be among Russian friends because of the granularity of the discourse. There is so much superficiality in this space. It's so much talk about gadgets, business models, making money. And of course, this is also happening there. But
I talk about all three of them.
I know, but life is life. IoT is about life. It's a new level of ontology. And we cannot just go in there with sort of making money or doing business or having the next gadget and then building the next gadget on the next gadget or living in the interface of the next interface.
So what do you mean by granularity? What do you mean by in Russia they talk about the granularity?
4 years ago, I was there talking about Internet of Things at the Institute of Philosophy. So this is the Institute of Philosophy that we're going to talk about these things. And it was in the morning and one of the professors was saying, well, it's all nice and so good, but the kids are no longer going with me into the woods to pick strawberries. And yeah, I mean, what can you say? So this is very important. Sort of the speed and the scope that's in this 3-step, pass on the packet, pass on the link, pass on the data, is also gotten some instrumental efficiency to it that's becoming a little bit apart from life and living.
Yeah.
And so people are beginning to wonder if this is what life is about. People on their devices all day, these devices talking to other devices, sort of maybe nice and transparent, it may be efficient, but is that life? Is that all that there is to life, being efficient? Isn't that something that machines should do? Are we then becoming machines? Do we want that? I don't want that.
Yeah, no.
I want a very good balance between what machines are good at, what they should do, and what humans are good at and what humans should do. And this I find more in Russia than anywhere else. So the people also talk blockchain, crypto, and ICOs. So they're fully in the space. They're into 5G. They're everywhere. But there also seems to be a more philosophical understanding, a granularity of thinking that is that sort of that wants to create some kind of human still awareness in all of this, and that's what I really like about being in Russia.
That's fantastic. I find that, I'm a big optimist, so I find that even if companies give gadgets and they have all this strategy and business models and they deploy it, in the end, people are people, and I don't think our core humanity will go away, of being kind, community. These are things which sound like cliche when you talk about it.
Well, that's exactly why we have to keep talking about it. I mean, this is sort of that what defines us as humans, which basically to me is love and shame, which is also the two things that Nietzsche ended with, sort of if we cannot talk about that, if that becomes another marketing machine for soap or cars, sort of like then we've lost it.
There was one story where in Australia, I want to say it's Melbourne, they decided to put tags on trees,
on the trees,
and people could actually use that to send an email to the tree and could say this tree needs cutting, it's grown too much or whatever, right? Thinking from a very utilitarian perspective, and people wrote love letters to the trees.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, and I drive around, and here in my town, and I live near Cupertino. I'm not in Cupertino where Apple is, but it's my nearest town where I drive a lot. And every single street, they have one type of tree. That means they've done it like 30-40 years back, thoughtfully. But I have magnolias in one tree, or I have ginkgos in one whole street. So it's beautiful. So I was thinking, we as a community have our shared family history or community history with trees. So there could be a tree where I took my kid to climb up and jump around. And so I have a personal connection with that tree. I have that when I go back to Chennai in India. So like that, I think we cannot think of new urbanization saying, hey, we are going to get rid of all the cars and then we're going to create a new park in the middle of town. What happens to the old trees? What happens to the old park where I grew up? And I don't want that to go away. So there's a balance there, but automation has to come with preserving that humanity in little pockets of community. And I believe
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So I think I raised the issue of animism in 2002 in a conference on ubiquitous computing, and of course nobody got it, and it was logical. So I would have needed more context to actually bring it in. But the humanity has been more animistic for a way long period of time. And then we have this IoT. Sort of people have been hugging trees, talking to trees, have special relationships with objects before we could tag them, thousands of years before that. So what's very important to me what I understood was who is doing the tagging, where does the data go, in which platform, and who's actually bringing out new scenarios to all these stakeholders in the neighborhood. That should be us. That should be citizens, should be people. That should be a democratic decided procedure. At the moment, it's not. At the moment, the old actors have hijacked the capabilities of IoT for their own old ends. Now that should stop. Of course, it's going to stop, and they know this, because the inherent transparency and inherent flow that's in IoT will always be bigger than the control paradigms that are on it. And of course, the engineers know they would sort of build it. But
so
it doesn't mean.
If you notice, I don't promote too many other people's brands or books. I try to be very agnostic, but I have this book called The Future is Smart by David Stephenson. And he talks about democratizing data. That's been his
Yes.
life calling. He's part of the council too. And he was talking about how nowadays data is not something that upper management would have and then decide who gets what. It just flows through the company in real time.
Yeah.
So an engineer or somebody out in the field would have access to data. Based on that, they could make decisions. So it automatically changes the whole flow of a company from linear, hierarchical to a very circular, what he calls as a circular corporation. So I love the concept.
Absolutely. So this is exactly, and David is talking in a great way about that and writing in a great way about that. Also, and he's also very much an organizational expert. So he's doing a lot of, he's talking to a lot of companies and sort of advising them on this change management. And so exactly, so this sort of is what's happening. And I think I see us and council and people in council as a large team of different sensibilities, because we have all kinds of people who intuitively feel that this was a logical answer, because the world simply could not go on without an internet or without this sharing or without this capability for sharing in large ecosystems. This year, I'm very happy to see that we have also in council. So we got all of a sudden there were people from Africa joining, and these are brilliant lone engineers, and they're all sort of finding a way to build some kind of a group around them, and they manage to be in small ecosystems. They get picked up by larger ecosystems and bigger companies that are working in Africa. But it seems that they're able to keep being sort of free operators, sort of like in this ecosystem, doing this and doing that, being very agile and very, and they're doing great work, of course. Yeah. In I think in also building this kind of level and layer of connectivity that will lead to better decision making on the ground everywhere, and then also in Africa, in business ecosystems, maybe also in political ecosystems at some point, in cities, in villages. And to me, this is a large liberatory and emancipatory move, because it means that instead of decisions being made on local data somewhere else with other indicators or other purposes in mind, will now stay local. So the decision making will be much more, as it's called, at the edge, because because this is now Africa's moving not so much to the African cloud, or it's moving to the edge, and because of it's got a leapfrogging into this reality where it can use more stronger microprocessors that can do all the intelligence, it can do the data processing, it can do sort of run the AI sort of like on this local level. And this
and their use cases are very local to them. Oluwatobi is, I'm a big fan of Oluwatobi.
Me too. Yeah.
I think you introduced me to him. So
yeah. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's right. And so he's actually building pay-as-you-go cooking. I mean, that's very, very unique to Nigeria that he's focused on.
Yeah, but these are these new services that we could not have sort of heard of or dreamt of, and these are also happening on the fly and being picked up in different places. And but yeah, of course, this is also because of IoT, because of the cheapness now of the hardware, of storing data, of the connectivity itself, and this is now making it possible to do not simply let's do a demo. But okay, let's make a product immediately now and see what happens. And sort of, it's going much more sort of the actual cycles of going through making a business or making a service is going way faster.
So and before we wrap up, I want to ask you about China, because for IoT Day you're going to be at China while people are watching this, and that is one country where I have gone from eBay, as traveled in my past, but not had an opportunity to interview people because I can't use any of my network and data is restricted. And so I kind of have a limitation. So I would love for you to tell me about IoT in China and what will you be doing on IoT Day?
Yeah. Well, IoT in China, I've been in and out of China for the past 10 years. And I think the reason to understand China is that the Chinese politicians are engineers. So they've been running the country like a platform for the past 40, 50 years. And they've seen very early that the data, if it becomes a new layer, that they have to host it in their own bubble. And this is what they did with the deep packet inspection and closing down the web for a certain extent and closing down the internet. Now we see that that was a good decision in the sense that I think that the value should be where people pay taxes. So if I pay taxes in a particular region, then that region should host my data, should be their platforms, run the AI, and give me better services because I pay taxes. It's happening in China. It's not happening in Europe where I live because my data are in the hands of GAFA. And so this is also going to be very, very problematic for our national states and the supranational entities. So in China, the amount of potential coherence of the industrial internet with consumer internet, with sharing clouds between value chains. When I was in Wuxi, this was last year, there was collaborative prototyping of hardware in hardware environments, collaborative prototyping of microprocessor companies in Wuxi. And the Internet of Things experts that I saw, the people running the Internet of Things program, were IoT billionaires, so that they were independent of money streams and that they could build their own sort of programs. What I found 4 years ago when I was in Shenzhen is that the beginnings of what is now called the social credit system, of course, there's a control element. You cannot deny that. It's very clear. It's also part of the sort of the system approach of the cybernetics. But it was also built because of reputation management. China has brought people from the village into the city in about 20 years. In Europe, we did that in 150 years. If you read the literature in 150 years ago, Charles Dickens and Charles Reed, it's all about documents that are being misled, that are sort of getting lost because of the people are moving from the village to the city. And then there's all kinds of things happening. It's the beginning of the police. It's the beginning of this. It took us 150 years to build.
But I also heard the overall in the world, more than 50% or 70% of population is now urbanized. And so I'm taking this course called
CTX. This happened. Yes, and this happened very fast in China. And so the amount of scams that were there, and the amount of money that people lost, the amount of distrust that was happening between people, is also a reason for building new types of reputation management. So again, there is a control element, but there are also other elements for why it would make sense, and it still sort of makes sense to start sort of such a large experiment sort of as this. So we should not just look at that, because a lot of people are looking negatively and saying, oh, it's just about control and everybody's in the grid and things like that. I'm very sorry. This is happening as we speak. If you're not in a national bubble, you're in a commercial grid. So my price of anything that I buy is in the hands of a few commercial players that give me an algorithm that sell that to eBay and Amazon and the booking. And that will go offline pretty quickly. So we get dynamic pricing offline, put my phone to any object in the supermarket, getting my price, which is a killer application of retail. So all of this is happening as we speak. So this is why it's so very important that citizens realize, look, you're going to be in some kind of large ecosystem with so much connectivity and so much control. Won't you at least like to be part of debating who is having all this control? Wouldn't you like to be part of?
In China, the debate is not happening. In China, the debate is not happening, right?
It's happening. Oh, yes, it's happening. So that when you go into the ground, when you talk to people, it's happening. There's a lot of things happening. There is discussion. Absolutely. It's not.
So you're going to be back at Shenzhen. You're going to be back at Shenzhen. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm just paranoid of my connectivity recording costing off. So and we got some good material. Like we had recorded for 45 minutes, so it's going to,
Yeah.
I have another minute. So
Yeah.
I want to go back to Shenzhen and see if you can wrap up. So you're going to be back at Shenzhen. So what's happening on IoT Day at Shenzhen? Why are you there?
Yeah, I'm very happy to be in Shenzhen on IoT Day because I'm also going to be with my good friend David Lee. And David Lee I met a long time ago when he ran the first hack lab in Shanghai. And this was a fantastic space, and it was sort of the vitality was it was vibrant, and he was running it. And since then he's been asked to go to Shenzhen and set up the Open Innovation Lab together with other people. Of course, he's always in a team doing that. And yeah, I've been seeing him again in Shanghai lately, and it's just massively interesting what he's doing. He's got a really great view, and I'm always very happy to be around him and to learn from what he's doing. Because also
will we get to see what is this open innovation?
Yes, definitely. I think we'll put out some footage, or we'll maybe put it out on at least on WeChat. Just get your WeChat. But no, we're going to put that out, and I'm so interested in what's happening there because it's happening. Sort of, it's really alive. It's not a demo phase. Sort of like is in a continuous flux.
Yeah.
But it's in a continuous flux where people are able to look at instances of cities, like for example, when I was meeting the CTO from Baidu in Hangzhou, and their goal is to take about 70% of all the traffic out, because they've calculated they can do the same type of movement that is needed with only 20% of all the movement that's happening. So they don't need the other 60 basically. And they are now tuning their decisions in the city, in the kind of the city brain, towards getting to that result. These are massive potential results that we need in terms of energy management in order to harness anything that we would like to do against climate change. So to me, IoT is the only reasonable answer with full resource management. And that has to be centralized, I think. And the services can be centralized, and people should be free and have their data. But the infrastructure, the only chance we have with climate change is full resource management, and for that we need IoT. I think that's why it's in the world also to a large extent.
That's fantastic. In fact, I have Patrick Slavenburg, I think his name is.
Yeah, Patrick. Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah.
So he's actually talking to me about data in real time and how to manage that. And his passion comes from solving climate change problems. And his point is there are so much data everywhere, but owned by various corporations who don't even know where the data is, how to create value. And there's a lot of digital management challenges. Yeah. So AI is going to be more useful in solving problems that are new. And climate change creates a different kind of problem, and it is not stuck with one entity. Like you said, what you call as the ecosystem. Yeah. We need a whole ecosystem to come together to solve that. Yeah. And so
that's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And actually, I think that's happening. I really think that's happening. So that's why I'm sort of very positive. And that's also why I've never been really negative with the current sort of control mechanisms that certain small or larger groups of stakeholders are able to have and control, because it won't last. It simply won't last. So I'm counting on the flow, and the flow is with us.
We should end at that note. The flow is with us. Like the force is with us.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. Hope you have a fun IoT day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.